If you've ever had a moment where your whole life changed in the space of a single dinner, you'll understand why I still remember the sound of paper, tearing more clearly than any birthday, any holiday, any graduation. It was the sound of my future being ripped in half, right there at the table in front of everyone I loved. But what my father didn't know, what none of us knew, was that the real story was just beginning. It was a Friday night, the kind where the air feels heavy with things unsaid. My mother had made her famous roast, the one she only cooked for special occasions. My father was in a good mood, or so I thought, laughing too loudly at his own jokes, pouring himself a second glass of wine before the salad was even served. My grandmother sat at the end of the table, quiet as always, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes missing nothing. I'd been waiting for this night for weeks. My college acceptance letter had arrived that morning, thick and official with my name printed in bold at the top. I'd hidden it in my backpack all day, afraid to jinx it, afraid to hope. But now, with everyone gathered, I wanted to share my news. I wanted to see pride in my father's eyes, to hear my mother's squeal of delight, to feel my grandmother's gentle hand on my shoulder. So I cleared my throat and pulled the envelope from my bag. "I got in," I said, my voice trembling. "State University. Full scholarship." For a moment there was silence. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My grandmother smiled just a little. But my father's face darkened. He reached across the table, snatched the letter from my hands, and before I could react, he tore it in half, then in quarters, then in eighths. The pieces fluttered to the floor like confetti. "No daughter of mine needs an education," he said, his voice cold and final. "You're not going anywhere." I stared at the scraps of paper, my dreams scattered at my feet. My mother said nothing, just stared at her plate. My grandmother sat quietly for 30 seconds, her face unreadable. Then she stood up, put on her coat, and looked my father dead in the eye. "Pack her bags," she said. My father laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "And where exactly do you think you're taking her? This is my house. My rules." My grandmother didn't flinch. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She laid it on the table, right where my acceptance letter had been. "Not anymore," she said softly. My father frowned, confused. He picked up the paper, his hands suddenly unsteady. He read it once, then again, his face draining of color. It was the deed to the house. His house. Or so he thought. My grandmother's voice was calm, almost gentle. "I bought this house before you married my daughter. I put it in my name. I let you live here because I thought you'd take care of your family. But tonight, you showed me who you really are." My mother gasped. My father's hands shook. I just sat there, stunned, as my grandmother turned to me and said, "Go pack your things, sweetheart. You're coming with me." I didn't move at first. I was afraid it was a dream, that I'd wake up and find myself back at the table, my future still in pieces on the floor. But my grandmother took my hand, steady and warm, and led me upstairs. We packed in silence. I took only what I needed: clothes, books, the photo of my mother and me at the beach, the necklace my grandmother had given me for my 16th birthday. Downstairs, I could hear my father shouting, my mother crying, the sound of something breaking. But my grandmother never hurried. She moved with the calm of someone who had already made up her mind. When we came back down, my father blocked the door. "You can't do this," he said, his voice desperate now. "She's my daughter." My grandmother looked at him, her eyes steely. "You lost the right to call her that when you tore up her future." He tried to argue, but she handed him the deed. "You have 30 days to find a new place to live," she said. After that, the locks change. My mother stood in the hallway, torn between us. I wanted her to come with me, to choose me just once. But she stayed by my father's side, her face pale and frightened. We left that night, the two of us, into the cold and the dark. My grandmother's car was waiting at the curb. The engine running, the heater blasting. She drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other reaching over to squeeze mine. I didn't cry, not then. I was too numb, too shocked, too full of questions. Where would we go? What would happen next? Was my life really over, or was it just beginning? As the city lights faded behind us, my grandmother finally spoke. "You're going to college," she said. "You're going to have the life you deserve. And no one, not even your father, can stop you now." I looked out the window, watching the world rush by, and for the first time all night, I let myself hope. The next morning, I woke up in a room that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, painting patterns on the wooden floor. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then I saw my suitcase by the door, my grandmother's slippers by the bed, and it all came rushing back: the dinner, the letter, the way my father's face had crumpled when he realized the house wasn't his after all. My grandmother was already in the kitchen, humming to herself as she made breakfast. She greeted me with a smile and a plate of pancakes, just the way I liked them, crispy at the edges, soft in the middle. "Eat," she said, pouring syrup over the stack. "You have a big day ahead." I ate in silence, my mind racing. I wanted to ask her 1,000 questions about the house, about my mother, about what would happen next. But all I could manage was, "Are you sure about this?" She sat down across from me, her eyes kind but firm. "I've never been more sure of anything. You deserve a chance, and I'm going to make sure you get it." After breakfast, we drove to the university. My grandmother marched into the admissions office like she owned the place, which, given her confidence, I half believed she did. She explained the situation, handed over the torn pieces of my acceptance letter, and within an hour I was officially enrolled. The woman at the desk smiled at me, her eyes warm. "Welcome to State," she said. "You're going to do great things." We spent the rest of the day shopping for supplies, bedding, notebooks, a new backpack to replace the one I'd left behind. My grandmother insisted on buying everything, waving away my protests. "This is an investment," she said. "In you." That night, as I unpacked in my new dorm room, I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. I was free, but I was also alone. My mother hadn't called. My father hadn't tried to find me. I wondered if they missed me, if they regretted what had happened, or if they were too busy fighting over the house to even notice I was gone. Classes started the next week. I threw myself into my studies, determined to prove that I belonged. I made friends, real friends, the kind who cheered me on when I aced a test and brought me soup when I caught the flu. I joined clubs, volunteered at the campus library, and even tried out for the debate team. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something of my own. My grandmother called every Sunday, always asking about my classes, my friends, my dreams. She never asked about my parents, and I never brought them up. It was an unspoken agreement, a way to keep the past from creeping into the present. But the past has a way of finding you, no matter how far you run. One afternoon, as I was leaving the library, I saw my mother waiting by the steps. She looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders hunched, her eyes rimmed with red. For a moment, I thought about turning around, pretending I hadn't seen her. But something in her face stopped me. She rushed over, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I should have stood up for you. I should have left with you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to let her back in. But another part of me remembered all the times she'd chosen silence over action, comfort over courage. We sat on a bench, the autumn leaves swirling around us. She told me about the weeks after I left, how my father had raged, how he'd tried to convince her to beg my grandmother for forgiveness, how he'd finally packed his things and moved out when he realized she wouldn't. She told me she'd filed for divorce, that she was living in a small apartment across town, that she was trying to start over. "I want to be part of your life," she said, her eyes pleading. "If you'll let me." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I wanted to believe her, to believe that people could change. But trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. As the months passed, my mother and I slowly found our way back to each other. She came to visit on weekends, bringing homemade cookies and stories from her new job. She apologized over and over for not protecting me, for not seeing what I needed. I forgave her a little more each time. My father, on the other hand, stayed away. He sent a few angry emails, blaming me for everything that had happened, for losing the house, for breaking up the family, for daring to want more than he thought I deserved. I deleted them without reading past the first line. My grandmother was my rock through it all. She came to every school event, cheered the loudest at my debate competitions, and never missed a single parent-teacher meeting. She told me stories about her own struggles, how she'd fought for her education, how she'd built a life for herself when everyone told her she couldn't. She made me believe that I could do the same. By the end of my first year, I was thriving. I made the dean's list, won a scholarship for my writing, and was elected president of the debate team. My grandmother beamed with pride, telling anyone who would listen that her granddaughter was going to change the world. But even as I built a new life, the memory of that night, the sound of my father tearing up my future, never quite left me. It became a scar, a reminder of how quickly things can change, and how sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Still, I refused to let that pain define me. I was more than my father's anger, more than my mother's silence, more than the pieces of a torn letter. I was my grandmother's granddaughter, and I was just getting started. Graduation day arrived with the sky so blue it felt like a promise. My grandmother sat in the front row, her hands folded over her purse, her eyes shining with pride. My mother was beside her, holding a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked herself. I scanned the crowd for my father, but I knew he wouldn't come. He hadn't spoken to me in years, not since the night I left. I thought I'd feel empty. But as I walked across the stage to accept my diploma, all I felt was free. After the ceremony, my grandmother hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You did it, sweetheart," she whispered. "You did it all on your own." My mother wiped away tears, her smile shaky but real. We took photos in the sunlight, laughing as the wind tried to steal my cap. For the first time, I felt like I belonged exactly where I was. That summer, I started my first real job at a publishing house downtown. The work was hard, the hours long, but I loved every minute. My grandmother called every evening to ask about my day, and my mother visited on weekends, bringing groceries and stories from her new life. We were building something new, something fragile but real. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I saw a familiar figure waiting by the door, my father. He looked older, thinner, his hair grayer than I remembered. For a moment, I considered walking past him, pretending not to see. But something in his eyes stopped me. He cleared his throat, shifting from foot to foot. "I heard you graduated," he said, his voice rough. "Congratulations." I nodded, unsure what to say. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything we'd never said. He looked away, his jaw tight. "I lost the house, you know. Had to move into a rental. Your grandmother made sure of that." I met his gaze, steady and unafraid. "She did what she had to do." He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "I was wrong. About a lot of things. I thought I was protecting you, keeping you from disappointment. But I see now I was just afraid. Afraid you'd outgrow me. Afraid you'd leave." I waited, letting his words settle. For years I'd dreamed of this moment. Of him admitting he was wrong. Of him asking for forgiveness. But now that it was here, I realized I didn't need it. I'd already forgiven him in my own way. I'd moved on. "I'm happy," I said quietly. "I have a good life. You could be part of it if you want. But I won't let you hurt me again." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I'd like that. If you'll have me." We stood there for a long moment. Two people trying to bridge a gap years in the making. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew I was strong enough to face it. A few months later, my grandmother fell ill. The doctors said it was her heart, that she needed rest. I spent every evening by her side, reading to her, telling her about my day. She smiled, her eyes soft. "You're everything I hoped you'd be," she said one night, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Promise me you'll keep going. Promise me you'll never let anyone tell you what you can't do." I promised. And when she passed, I kept that promise close, a light in the dark. The day we buried her, the whole town turned out. People I'd never met came up to tell me how much she'd meant to them, how she'd helped them when no one else would. I realized then that her strength wasn't just in what she'd done for me, but in the way she'd touched everyone around her. After the funeral, my mother and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. She took my hand, her grip warm and steady. "She was proud of you," she said. "So am I." I smiled, feeling her words settle in my heart. I thought about everything I'd been through. The night my father tore up my future, the years of struggle and doubt, the love that had carried me through. I realized that my story wasn't about what I'd lost, but about what I'd found: courage, resilience, and a family built on choice, not just blood. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been told you can't, that you're not enough, that your dreams are too big. Maybe someone tried to tear up your future too. But I'm here to tell you, you get to decide who you become. You get to write your own story. I did, and I wouldn't change a thing. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the hardest moments are the ones that shape us the most. I learned that real strength comes from believing in yourself, even when others don't. If you're ever made to feel small or unworthy, remember, you have the power to choose your own path and surround yourself with people who truly support you. I'm proud of who I've become, and I hope my story reminds you that you're never alone in chasing your dreams.